I've decided to move on. It is never a good time to bow down to a tyrant. I've always believed it's the job of the press to hold power to account. I've always tried to do that here at CNN. I will not give in to the lies. I will not give in to the fear. I'll have more to say about my plans in the coming days, but until then, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. It has been an honor.
In this video today, CNN host Jim Acosta quits live on air. Also, transgender service members get bad news from President Trump, and Senator John Fetterman goes on to The View and tells them what they don't want to hear. These stories and more in this video today, but let's start with hearing Jim Acosta's departing message.
You may have seen some reports about me and the show, and after giving all of this some careful consideration and weighing an alternative time slot CNN offered me, I've decided to move on. I am grateful to CNN for the nearly 18 years I've spent here doing the news. People often ask me if the highlight of my career at CNN was at the White House covering Donald Trump. Actually, no. That moment came here when I covered former President Barack Obama's trip to Cuba in 2016 and had the chance to question the dictator there, Raul Castro, about the island's political prisoners. As the son of a Cuban refugee, I took home this lesson. It is never a good time to bow down to a tyrant. I've always believed it's the job of the press to hold power to account. I've always tried to do that here at CNN, and I plan on doing all of that in the future. One final message. Don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to the fear. Hold on to the truth and to hope. Even if you have to get out your phone, record that message. I will not give in to the lies. I will not give in to the fear. Post it on your social media so people can hear from you too. I'll have more to say about my plans in the coming days, but until then, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. It has been an honor to be welcomed into your home for all these years. That's the news.
All right, well, good riddance, because we know that Jim Acosta was one of the most hateful, hyperbolic individuals at CNN, and I don't think it's even close. I think this is exactly the best outcome for everybody involved. I don't think people like him should be on TV. Now, that's my own personal opinion, only because every single show that he was doing came from a hateful place. I don't really think he was trying to get to the bottom of the truth. I just think he was always trying to tear down President Trump. And we've seen those viral exchanges in the first Trump administration. Now, the question is, why would CNN try to move him to the 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern time slot? Now, it's very clear they're trying to make sure that they don't do anything to upset President Trump. Now, why does that matter? Well, it's called good business. They learned in the first Trump administration and also over the last 4 years that going to war with Trump is bad business. You could criticize him, you could question his policy, but when you're so hateful, you're more than likely going to continue to lose out on ratings and your audience, especially when you lost the election in the way that you did. So this totally makes sense to me. Now, here's what Trump had to say. Wow, really good news. Jim Acosta, one of the worst and most dishonest reporters in journalistic history, a major sleazebag, has been relegated by CNN fake news to the midnight hour Death Valley because of extraordinarily bad ratings and no talent. Word is that he wants to quit, and that would be even better. Jim is a major loser who will fail no matter where he ends up. Good luck, Jim.
But your campaign had an ad showing migrants climbing over walls and so on.
Well, that's true.
But
they weren't actors.
They're not going to be doing that.
They weren't actors. Well, no, it's true. Do you think they were actors? They weren't actors. They didn't come from Hollywood. Right. These were people. This was an actual, it happened a few days ago. And
they're hundreds of miles away, though. They're hundreds and hundreds of miles away. That's not an invasion.
Honestly, I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN.
All right.
And if you did it well, your ratings would be much better.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask on.
All right, so that was just a flashback with one of the viral moments between Jim Acosta and President Trump. It just shows you how wrong the media was even back then. It's 2025. Everything Trump was saying back then actually ended up happening. There has been a mass invasion, which is why we have to have mass deportation. But of course, Democrats don't want to admit that, right? Because according to Kamala Harris the entire time, the border was secure. And if you think about the bigger picture of what's going on since Trump was elected, you've got ABC paying Trump $15 million to settle that defamation lawsuit. You got CBS in talks to settle their lawsuit due to that Kamala Harris deceptive editing interview. Then you've got Jim Acosta now out at CNN. Then you had Morning Joe and Mika. They even went physically to Mar-a-Lago, and they got so much backlash from that. And then steep pay cuts for Rachel Maddow, deranged Reed, and Stephanie Rule. So clearly, the media is the one adapting to Trump. And I think that tells you everything you need to know. All right, so it's not just the media who has to adapt to President Trump. And our next story here is transgender service members in the military who have to do the same, because yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order to ban transgenders from the military, which means they are going to get kicked out. So here's Peter Ducey from Fox News reporting on this.
The number of trans people in the armed services right now, I know there was an NIH study or estimate done like 5 years ago at 8,000. Who knows how many there are today? What's going to happen to those people?
It sounds like once Pete Hegseth comes up with the new policy, they are going to be discharged, and it's not essentially what the argument is in the fact sheet that we were given about that executive order. President Trump does not think that transgender people are physically or mentally stable enough to serve in the armed forces, and they specifically cite readiness with transition surgeries. If you have a transition surgery, the recovery time and the narcotics that you have to be on as part of the process could affect your readiness for up to 12 months. They say that is what their concern is. So if there's a readiness concern, you're basically booted from the military.
All right, so for someone who actually served in the military for 13 years, I'm going to tell you this. I never came across a transgender, okay? That's number one. Number two, I don't believe the military should be adapting itself to the smallest part of our population. And number three, I agree with Trump. This is a readiness issue. I believe these people are going through something mentally here. Now, some people might be triggered by that. I could care less. That is my personal opinion. And when you serve in the military, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. This is getting out of hand because it turned into a social justice political movement and not one about how do we make the military the most effective fighting force in the world. Now, of course, the counter argument is this doesn't affect readiness. In fact, this makes the military more successful due to diversity reasons, et cetera, et cetera. Hear it for yourself from an individual who served in the military as the first open transgender.
You know, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth talks about lethality in a warrior mindset. How does having transgender people in the military affect lethality?
It enhances lethality. Transgender people are a segment of America. The only thing that makes them different, the fact that they're trans doesn't change their ability to serve. It doesn't stop them from serving on the front lines, which is what they're doing right now. It enhances unit cohesion because it looks like the America that they serve.
Okay, so we know this is an argument that this individual is making in regards to representation, okay? They believe that if we represent transgenders, this is going to contribute to unit cohesion. That's just a bunch of bull, by the way. Now, let's take their argument into consideration, though. So what you're saying is, if I was to live in South Carolina or Georgia, as an example, which has the largest concentration of African Americans, and I compare that to living in, let's say, Los Angeles, am I going to go to the Los Angeles mayor and say, hey, we don't have enough black people living here? I think that's an issue. If we want to make sure that Los Angeles is more cohesive, we need more black people living in this city, because that's the argument that they're making, which doesn't make any sense. Now, here's another Army vet claiming that these individuals need their own space within the military.
And when you are able to provide a space where we value and we show that value of our members of the team, it allows them to really bring their full selves to the fight. And by doing away with that, we violate our integrity on a daily basis because we can't bring our full selves to the fight. So if you're not having service members serve in their authenticity and serve and bring their full selves to that fight, we are not effective as we would like to be.
Yeah, so this is just really tough to comprehend at times because it does not make any sense to me, okay? If she's trying to make her argument based on authenticity, well, if that's the case on a biological level, you guys are not being authentic whatsoever. And so I just think that these individuals, they need help. And that might be harsh for me to say, And again, when I was in the military, there was no such thing as transgender, okay? And I just believe this has been a distraction. This has been the military catering to people instead of focusing on what it should be focused on, which is protecting this country. Okay, so let's move to the next story. Senator John Fetterman and his wife visited Mar-a-Lago to meet with Trump. And by all accounts, it was a great meeting. Now, what's interesting is he went on to The View and described this meeting, and I don't think it's what these women wanted to hear. So what I want to do is react to it and talk about what's really happening with Senator John Fetterman and why Democrats probably should pay attention to him.
I'm curious what your takeaway was from meeting with him, and what if you found that there's any specific policy areas you think you can work with him on.
Yeah, well, I think overall it was a positive experience. I mean, he was kind, he was cordial. It wasn't in any kind of theater. It wasn't trying to get your picture taken to kind of put something out on social media. It was just really a conversation. I actually spoke for over an hour. And overall, my wife was there, and she might be watching right now at home. Hi, Giselle, you're home. And she was there as well, too. And we just had a conversation. And one of the things, can we agree on? Well, one of the things that was easy, like the Dreamers. You know, the Dreamers, immigration, that. And Giselle was part of that community, and we both had the opportunity to express that.
Yeah, so once again, we have another example that Trump is not what the media continues to paint him out to be. This is an individual that no matter how much you hate him, he will sit down with you and have a conversation. Remember, Joe Scarborough, these people were actually friends with Trump before he became the president. Then when they stabbed him in the back, think about how hurtful that was for him. I mean, I'm sure he was pretty pissed off about that. But to meet with them still after everything that has taken place, they called him rapist, by the way. I think that shows you the type of character Trump has and the leadership ability. So, of course, this is not what the Democrats want to hear, including this.
Is it anything you've been seeing, or do you anticipate that there's going to be changes that we should be prepped for that we're not thinking about?
I mean, honestly, I haven't been surprised by anything now. I mean, he's been doing essentially what he actually campaigned on that. Mm-hmm. He announced he is going to pardon the J6 individuals. He is going to absolutely go after the border. So there's a lot of things that he's already ran on. I mean, criticized a lot of it, mm-hmm. and I don't agree with everything either, but it's undeniable he actually ran on that and been really upfront. He's like, I am your reputation, and he's, kind of making those moves. So that's kind of where we're at. Early on, immediately after the election, I was like, hey, we have a choice. We can freak out and follow every other thing around, like a cat, with a laser, after everyone. But I'm not that guy. I'm not going to be that Democrat. For me, there's things I'm going to agree with, I'm going to disagree with, but I'm in the business of finding wins for Pennsylvania and for the nation, and engaging the president. I think I see that as doing my job.
Okay, so one of the biggest takeaways from me on this is that Senator John Fetterman, if he continues to do this, he's got to be at the top of the list of people who could potentially lead the Democratic Party in the future. Because even though we're never going to see eye to eye on a lot of policies as it pertains to what he believes in, at least he's willing to have the conversation. That's always been the difference between progressives and conservatives. Conservatives will have a conversation. We will love to debate you. Progressives want to shut you down and censor you. So it's interesting that he's really the only person that's in the party currently not operating from that mindset. And I don't think they like it. And the other thing they're not going to like is what the White House press secretary had to say today in her first press briefing. There's a few bombshells I want to react to, starting with probably the biggest one. And I know you're going to love this. Listen to it for yourself.
And in keeping with this revolutionary media approach that President Trump deployed during the campaign, the Trump White House will speak to all media outlets and personalities, not just the legacy media who are seated in this room. This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. And you can apply now on our new website, whitehouse.gov/new media. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. My team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex.
Now, I love that because that's exactly the way it should be. We should have an administration that allows all voices to come to the table and ask questions, okay? We know under the Biden administration, it was the utmost censorship ever, and they used the excuse of misinformation, which nobody is buying anymore because they are actually the ones that have been the most guilty at misinformation. And for some of you people wondering, yes, we did apply. So we'll see if we get approved. Say a prayer for us. I would love to obviously be there at one point out of those 4 years to ask some type of question or at least experience it. I think it's just amazing that they're doing this. At any rate, there was other bombshells that she also talked about. And one is about our tax dollars and how much money was actually going to go to Gaza for condoms. I know, listen to this.
DOJ and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money. So that's what this pause is focused on, being good stewards of tax dollars.
Now, she's responding to the question about the funding freeze that President Trump signed as an executive order. And no, this does not apply to people that are on SNAP or Social Security or those type of entitlement programs like Medicare. He's talking about these programs that under the Biden administration was wasting taxpayer dollars in the name of trying to help citizens. That when you hear 50 million going to Gaza in the name of condoms, clearly there's some fraud, waste, and abuse, which is why DOJ is so genius in not only finding these stupid atrocities with our tax dollars, but highlighting it and sharing that with the public. I think this is the ultimate game changer. Now, she also had to fact check them in regards to the price of eggs, because again, the media is trying to blame it on President Trump, although he just got into office. Here's what she said.
I'm really glad you brought this up, because there is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024, when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office, or upstairs in the residence sleeping, I'm not so sure, egg prices increased 65% in this country. We also have seen the cost of everything, not just eggs. Bacon, groceries, gasoline have increased because of the inflationary policies of the last administration. As far as the egg shortage, what's also contributing to that is that the Biden administration and the Department of Agriculture directed the mass killing of more than 100 million chickens, which has led to a lack of chicken supply in this country, therefore a lack of egg supply, which is leading to the shortage.
And that's why it's important to do your research, because if you just listen to the legacy media, they would have you believing that egg prices are higher because of what President Trump has failed to do. They're also going to blame egg prices on mass deportations. I mean, they think you're that stupid. So again, this is a totally culture shock to the press corps, of course, because she's not the one that they're going to be able to get over on as it pertains to a lot of these issues. I think she was the perfect pick to be the White House press secretary. And to prove it to you, here she is responding about the mass deportations. And again, the media, they just have a hard time accepting that if somebody crossed the border illegally, they have already committed a crime.
3,500 arrests ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office. Can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
Now that's what I would call the hard, cold truth. And it's something that progressives definitely will never accept because they don't see people who cross the border illegally as criminals. In fact, they want to give them amnesty. And that's exactly what you hear from me all the time because it's true. And that's why Republicans and Democrats will never see eye to eye on the actual immigration system itself. It's a problem they'd love to keep kicking down the road because it's something that they can use to their political benefit. If they really wanted to solve the problem, they could. All right, so let me get your guys' answer in the comment section to this particular question, which is probably the biggest one right now. Do you believe transgender service members should be banned from the military? That's the first question. And part two as well is, if you believe they should be banned for the military, do you believe they should be kicked out immediately? Let me know what your answers are in the comment section below. Now, President Trump signing that executive order that is sending shockwaves in the military when it comes to transgender service members is not the only thing he's been doing. He also fired the individuals who worked for Jack Smith in the Department of Justice, and that has everybody freaking out. So if you guys want to check out that story and more from last night, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.